They are meant to be curious. They are meant to draw out information if they are good questions. They are really meant to incite conversation and insight so that the two people talking to each other can actually get information, right? So they're behavioral, they're experience-based, they're scenario-based, they're inquisitive.
So I'm going to disagree. I think many of those are bullshit. And here's why. Hey, Nicole, what do you get when a former corporate CEO and a do-gooding executive walk into a recording studio?
Well, Erin, nothing, because the two of us are usually on my couch or Zoom because wine.
You get a podcast created for Gen X women who are bought into the corporate world, but fed up with the BS.
I know. It's how to thrive the 9 to 5 or 6 or 7.
It's career therapy. It's comedy. It's definitely full on authenticity. Basically, we give you tangible strategies to rise in your career without compromising everything else.
Because work doesn't have to suck.
Hey, Nicole.
Hey, Erin.
It's time for another podcast episode.
Because there are stupid questions in the universe.
There are. So before we do that, though,
sorry.
I want to give our listeners, I don't even know how to do this, but I want to give them just a tiny glimpse behind the scenes. So for those of you that have been with us for a long time, you know Nicole's craziness. Many of you are new. I don't quite know that. And when I say craziness, I mean it in all the wonderful ways.
She means eccentric. She means wait, I'm just going to stop you. I mean the quote from Speed where Keanu Reeves says, Jack, you're fucking crazy. You're crazy. And then Dennis Hopper says, Jack, I'm not crazy. Poor people are crazy. I'm eccentric.
That's exactly what I mean. So one of the things we've, just to expose our skibbies a little bit, in a good way, is we've been doing this for 4 years, but we never pretend to have all the answers. And so we've been doing some learning and some programs around how do you make podcasts better. And, there's these guidelines and rules, and we're trying to make it, more succinct and more on point and just plan out things a little bit more, which sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. And so we started up a Google Doc, which, I'm always sort of the wrangler. And I was like, okay, here's, anytime we have an idea, instead of texting each other, let's put it on the Google Doc. And then let's put a little bit of a framework, like what's the story we're going to tell? What are the points we're going to make? So Nicole, who's still typing, she sends, I do the first few with some little bullets and, probably 250 words. And then Nicole has an idea. Let's do a word count. Let's do a word count on your topic. Just because I want people to understand. And you know what? People are probably just like you. Oh, I can't do a word count because I don't know how to get to.
Okay. You can copy it into a Word document and then do a word count.
Whatever. It's like 1,000 words.
It's probably more than 1,000 words. It's probably equal to, that 2-page essay, a single space 10-point font essay assignment you get from English class. When someone react to this question and you're supposed to write a paragraph and then you write 3 pages, or I write 3 pages.
Well, and I bring this up because we've talked about this before. Like Nicole, if you don't know her, she graduated from Yale, Johns Hopkins. She's Mensa level intelligence. And she struggles. She also struggles. And part of that is
I do.
Part of that is, in this traditional corporate world and the communications and the, working with people. And so let me just give you one of the 12 different sections. And this one says, is that an authentic question? Fuck that smart guy. Did Carl S. ever work in corporate America or its offshoots with the general public? Was he a bureaucrat? Did he walk around in space where all intent is not for the purpose of intellectual insight or contemplative the physical? Anyway, it goes on and on.
Contemplating the philosophical nature of things.
I can't even say the word.
I'm also terrible. I'm also terrible at proofreading, just saying.
It's just hilarious.
It will make sense. It will make sense as we talk through this.
No, I know. I'm picking on you, but it's, just to give people inside view, like if you also have a hard time collecting your thoughts in a slightly more bulleted fashion and you are eccentric, you are in the right place.
Yes, you are in the right place. Especially if you're a Gen X woman who Just kidding. I feel like I was also feel like I just had like this moment of glimmer of realization is that, I pride myself on being a good manager. And, authentic communication sort of it requires a bi-directional communication, right? We both serving each other, as you always say. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, gee, I wonder if people have a hard time understanding me in my written communication. I wonder if this is a reason why I get stupid questions. We may end up turning around this whole topic on me.
That never happens.
That
That
never
never happens.
happens. That never happens.
That'd be a first.
So I'll tee this up because you gave me such a beautiful intro. Like the thing that was on my mind, right? Like everybody who works in any kind of organized chaos, right? As is corporate America or public service, is that you are essentially battered by questions all day long by all kinds of people. You work for them, your stakeholders, whatever. But beyond that, I have a boss, and who I adore, who has a military background, right? And I appreciate that because, as a lot of people know, I went to war college and I worked for the federal government and I was a diplomat overseas in wartime. And so we kind of connect on this topic sometimes. Like, even though I tend to be like this radical sort of big thinker, progressive, liberal, like sometimes we really connect on like the ordered chaos of the military. Like, and one of the things that he said to me the other day, as we were coming out of this like very painful, large discussion, he looks at me like dead in the eye and he's like, Cole, I want you to know something. He's like, as a lawyer and a military officer, he's like, there are such things as stupid fucking questions. I appreciate your honesty. And the reference that you made before, and I'll just bring this up, is that I think everybody probably has heard in one painful icebreaker training session, management session, where some well-intentioned group leader or manager has said, ask your questions. We're an inclusive, safe space. There are no stupid questions, right? And that is a version of like a Carl Sagan quote, who was, an intellectual and a philosopher and, a scientist, right? And his whole quote is
this the guy that you're saying, fuck that guy?
I'm saying, fuck that guy, right? His quote was, and is a version of it. He says, there are naive questions, there are tedious questions, ill-phrased questions put after inadequate self-criticism, but every question is a cry to understand the world. There was no such thing as a dumb question. And like, I looked at Tom and he looks at me and we're like, no, there are stupid fucking questions, because not everybody necessarily comes to things or is self-aware enough to ask questions that have good intent. Sometimes they come out as interrogations, or they come out for the purpose of sort of exposing something or elevating something, right? They don't always come with good intent. And sometimes it's on purpose.
And pure curiosity, which I think was what he was trying to say in that quote. But the reality is most don't. Most don't.
This is a guy whose mind was in space, in science, right? Everything in his world revolved around curiosity. And I guarantee he was surrounded by people who were equally curious. Well, in corporate America, we realize this. I actually just sent you an article this morning you probably didn't get to see, but they talk about psychologists finally figuring out why some toxic personalities do well at work. And I'm like, yeah, because they have low freaking cutting, right? Like low honesty, low modesty, like inability to operate and use social skills for self-promotion rather than for promotion of the group, right? That's exactly what I'm talking about here. And I don't mean to be a negative Nancy, but I know everybody who has worked in a group environment knows exactly what I'm talking about, right? You sit in a room, you're told no questions or stupid questions, and somebody raises their hand and says something that is utterly fucking asinine, right? This is something, or you're leading the group and they say something that is like, that is meant to take you off your rocker, right? It's not an honest, curious question. It is meant to distract or to create some measure of sort of a break in flow of conversation. It's more of a statement of knowledge or an undermining of, what's actually going on in the room. And,
pick me for,
Erin, can you give us an example of what I'm talking about, please?
I know you've got stories and I know you're going to go take us places, but it all came to vision. Let me give you an example of one of many, but a really egregious example of what you're talking about. One of the worst meetings I ever had, at least in my executive time career, was we were working on this project with another company, and they really wanted us to partner up on it. And on the surface, it sounded great, but when you got into the details, it was a hot mess, and we shouldn't do it. And there were just all kinds of concerns. It was going to impact our business, et cetera, et cetera. But this other company had really, their culture was, if the CEO wants to do it, we just, the people do it, right? We shove it down.
Exactly.
And so I had spent months trying to lead up this project. And by the way, this is when I was CEO. So I was a VP at the parent company, running my own company. I was at a high level. Our organization was supposed to be the company that partnered with them. I was not a peon.
Right.
But I was very involved because they had made this very senior level. And so we'd spent about, 2 or 3 months vetting things out. There were all kinds of things that I knew were just a disaster and didn't want to move forward with it. But they were putting pressure from, the other company's CEO was putting pressure over to his executive contacts that were sort of above me to get this done. And it was creating just total chaos. And so we had this one meeting, and it was me, and I think it was just on the phone. It was me and maybe 4 others. And one of the guys that came, he was the head of, I think, strategy. He was an ass. And this is the bad question he asked. He said, Erin, pretend you're this other company, and what would be the value that you're trying to get out of it? So he tried to put me, first of all, in the voice of the company he knew I did not agree with or appreciate at all.
Yep.
And asked me to tell them the value, which you could have simply asked, hey, what does this company see as the reason they want to do this? Right. Instead,
an honest question.
He tried, maybe he was trying to sound smart by making it more complicated.
We're leading the witness.
Right. But what he did was put me in a position that completely threw me, quite frankly, off my rocker, which is not easy to do.
Right.
And made me feel, really inauthentic and weird, like role play. Right. I have to talk about something and pretend like I'm giving all the value and benefits that I don't understand. And so when you tee this up, and I know there's, I immediately to my head, I think of passive aggressive or poorly worded or very vague, but that instance immediately just popped into my head. And I'm like, that was a horrific question.
I invite all of our listeners to contact us, email, Facebook, whatever, LinkedIn, to share their versions of the story, because I know that we have it, and it could be fairly cathartic to share it, because sometimes our podcasts like this start out with a bitch, but it's a bitch for a reason, right? It's like, let's lay out the thing that we all encounter every day that we're all afraid to talk to because we feel like we're walking into a minefield, or that we have to navigate something carefully because it's a one-off situation. This was a person with bad intent. Well, I actually think there are some strategies to deal with this, to identify it in a meeting, or simply just to prepare yourself to know that it can happen to you, and what do you do when it does happen to you. But also, if you are the bad question asker, let's also contemplate what that behavior says about the situation you're in. It doesn't necessarily say that you're a bad person, but it might say something about the environment in which you're working and whether or not it really appeals to you, whether your boss appeals to you, or the situation, or the level of control you have. Sometimes we ask these questions, it all comes down to intent, right? We find ourselves in these situations being the asker or the askee, and it is a much larger window into what's going on in the world. And that's always what I'm trying to do, is to get people to ask themselves, what's the bigger storyline here? So, with Tom, it was interesting because he basically said, look, there's because we were in a meeting where it was quite, we are in a difficult environment. Regulatory has there's a natural jockeying to it. It's a natural adversarial situation, and everything is an interrogation, no matter what, right? You're often in the world of stupid questions where you're constantly trying to identify what is an authentic question or what is something that, you're setting each other up for. It's the nature of the work. I think it's the nature of legal work, maybe. So it's in this like crazy environment. But he was taking a step back and was talking about, being on a submarine. And he's like, look, at all these guys on a submarine. And he was saying that, some of the, you're locked in this thing under the ocean, and shit can like quite literally go underwater fast when you're dealing with young people who have not worked in this kind of environment before. They might be low skill. There's a chain of command. And he was just saying, it all comes back to intent and the intent of the people asking the question, and that he would often find himself having to take a breath and to try to understand, what kind of literal minefield was he walking into? Like, what's the tricky situation, right? By being the person who feels like they have to give the answer, he found that he often would walk into situations that were many layers deeper. And this is something I struggle with, Erin, right? I feel like I need to be the person with the answer who answers the question immediately. It's just who I am, and not necessarily taking a step back to say, when you're in that meeting with that employee or you're in the strategy meeting that you're talking about, if you don't take that time to sort of take that breath, step number one, to say, hold on a minute, what's the intent of this inquiry, right?
Yeah.
Is this an authentic question? Is this an interrogation?
Is it the right question?
Is it the right question? Is it a setup? Like, what is the problem that we are trying to solve, right? Just like you just said, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Like, you can walk into a freaking minefield. And he talked a lot about this, where he just felt like he and I relate on this topic of feeling like we have to have the immediate answer to sort of fend off risk. There's risk everywhere, and we have to stop the risk. So we have to have the answer, and we have to give a definitive answer right now. This also relates to people who do things like customer service. Like, a lot of people in our community work with the general public, or work in customer service, or work with others they have to serve in some capacity. How many times does somebody come to you with an email or a problem or a call or something and says, like, here's my entire situation, and I'm so upset about the nature of the universe that there are, space beams being beamed into my head, and your product doesn't work and it doesn't serve me. And then I got sick from it, or I tripped over something on my floor and I hit my head, and now I can't do my work. I mean, there's always like a million things, and you have to scrape through all of that and say, what is the problem? What is the singular problem that I can solve? Or what is the singular problem that is identified here? And do I have the tools? Am I the right person to address that issue? That is like the first point. But how many times do we not do that? Like, I feel like I can't believe I have to remind myself after 25 years of work that there are a lot of stupid questions out there that if you do not take the time to take a pause, you can end down a really tricky road, right? The tricky side to this is, like, you can go down a negative road where if you don't take a step back, you can be really tripped up. Like, imagine a situation as a tricky HR situation, right? Where, like, you don't take a step back, you don't ask the right questions, or take a pause, or reflect on what's happening in that moment. You can end up in a really tricky situation yourself. Or what if you have a situation where you have to have a really good record of the work you do, and you don't take time to do the due diligence because you're just like, I got hit with this question and I got defensive about it, or it undermined me. And now all of a sudden I have to demonstrate that I did what I did, right? Now all of a sudden you're put in this defensive mode because somebody asked you a stupid question and you responded poorly to it. Yeah. So this is like an interaction, this is step one is like that pause,
pause. What do they really want? I used to see this a lot, especially, when I was an executive, and let's say there's an email where, it wasn't unusual for me to ask a question to somebody that was 2-3 levels below me, because I knew most everyone, right? So a lot of times these people were interacting, and with somebody that's, much more senior than them.
Oh, yeah.
And what I would find that would happen a lot, and I encourage people to like take that pause that you're talking about, is the question I would have for them was usually pretty simple. So it was usually that I was like getting ready to go to a quarterly business review meeting and I had to talk to something or whatever. And I might ask a question and it really demanded a very simple, like yes or no, or maybe a number like, 10,222. And it was actually the opposite. People would assume that it was such a simple question that couldn't be all I was asking.
Oh,
that's
a good one.
Because they know their stuff so well, but I have to, sitting 2-3 layers up, I don't know their stuff as well to the details, right? I know a little bit about this. I know a little bit about that. And so
they think the stupid question was like a trick, basically. The stupid question. They think you're tricking them.
Yeah. I mean, I think there would be like first of all, an anxiety that came in general when you get a question from the big boss, which I would say,
right.
A lot of times the big boss, and I've been on the other side too, right? Is not usually trying to, unless they're an evil person, you already know they're an evil person. They're probably literally just looking for an answer and they don't know the details that you think they know. They just don't.
What is the intent? What is the intent of the question?
What is the intent? And so a lot of times I would get very long, like it's 10,222, but we're working on increasing that to da-da-da-da-da, and we have a plan in place to da-da. And I'm like, I just needed to know the 10,222. And so it was sort
details. I trust you.
Yeah. It was like almost a simplicity. I mean, there are certainly times when you get a question from somebody like that, maybe more senior, that also you're not asking the right question. So I also encourage like, well, I know you're asking about how many widgets, but actually we track this back, based on wojits, right?
Absolutely.
So be consultative. But I think that one of the biggest lessons I would give from sort of the perch I sat on for a while was a lot of times that question literally is the question. It's not a way to dig. It's not a way to uncover your faults. It's not a cry for more information. And I think to your point, understanding intent, but also understanding where things are at, and not that they, could know my schedule and stuff like that. But I started to get better to know when my bosses write me, I'd be like, I think they have investor relations meeting today. So that's probably why they're asking it. Or I know they were going to have a one-on-one with so-and-so, right? So that context always really helps. So I think the more you can also understand, like you can understand their intent by also really trying to diagnose what is the context, where are they at? Is it a day where they're just trying to survive because they've got, all their bigwig meetings, or is it a day, maybe that's not going on. They're more trying to think and strategize, and that might command a little different answer than if not.
I like that because there's basically like a stratification that we're talking about, right? We're talking about like there can be quote unquote stupid questions or questions that are perceived to be stupid from the big bosses. There can be stupid questions from customers you serve. There can be stupid questions from your peers or junior staff, right? Stupid questions can come from all directions or feel stupid, like in many ways and for many reasons. And it's sort of the process of authenticity that you describe that I think puts the person at the center to say, this feels like a stupid question. Is it a stupid question, right? So like you said, understanding intent, right? And then sort of maybe like taking that pause to be like, okay, like what is this? Because I'm not saying things are reflexively a stupid question. All I'm saying is that we have to open ourselves to the possibility that not everybody has the same intent, but not everybody also has the same manner of delivery, right? So I feel like there's also things about the way that questions are phrased. You said this before, are they trying to invite knowledge? Are they opening a door of inquiry? Is it honest, or is it that they're sort of laying out a point or a scenario where they're just like shutting out other opinions, right? Or does it come with some kind of accusation or almost like a cross-examination? Like, well, as you know, we shipped 57 widgets and I heard that we have to ship 57,000 widgets. How do you intend to make this work, right? Those kinds of
questions. They don't want to know how you intend. They just want to
they want
Flash you
to
further.
right, they want to call you out, even though it probably reflects some worker anxiety. Like there's also listening to those questions as a manager also can give you a really sharp window into how your employees are feeling too, right?
Yeah.
Like the culture. So I think being a man in the manager role, right? Executive manager role, I think another point of thought that came up between me and Tom is like, well, how do you how do you be that person who by cultural design is supposed to open yourself to all questions, right? Like how do you invite in all questions carefully? Because the whole intent to say things like ask your questions, this is an open meeting, is that you want to invite collaboration, right? You want things to be inclusive. But how many times do you immediately get that first question and it's the opposite, right? It's divisive. It's everything that we've been talking about. It limits diversity. It shuts out other voices in the room. It might make people feel nervous or othered, or just changes the tone of the conversation. That happens to me a lot, Erin. Like I'm having a conversation, I'm doing a training, I'm showing something, and the first question is, it is the opposite of creating a space that is additive to the knowledge, right? I'm asking a question because I want to add to the knowledge. It is actually reductive, right?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that comes to mind, so I love that. So first we kind of talked about how do you receive questions, like you are inherently going to receive bad questions or maybe just questions that are not clear, right? And you have to pause. And then second is how do you invite those in? And then, let's also talk about how do you make better questions. But, the first thing that I would say is, how do you replace that? There are no bad questions. Like, what are your questions? There are no bad questions because we've already dispelled that. I think that word curious or curiosity that you said at the beginning, to me, like the best questions truly come from a place of curiosity, right? That to me, that sort of shuns a lot of the shit, right? Yes. The passive aggressive, I have an idea, but I'm going to form it with a question mark at the end. Mm-hmm. So, it'd be interesting to try in a meeting like that to instead say, all right, finish my presentation. What are you curious? What did I say that you're curious about? Or, like somehow really getting at that word that gets the frame of mind. Like what I want to hear from you is curiosity, not crappy ass questions.
We're not looking for a performance review. What we're looking for is to expand the conversation. I think that can go a really long way because it can truly deflect the voices in the room of, let's call it the prepared questions, right? Mm-hmm. Like that is often the challenge, is that people are prepared to some degree. They know what the topic is and they bring their anxieties and reflections and thoughts and experiences and hurts and wants and needs and angers and disappointment into preformed questions, right? Mm-hmm. And that is the part that derails this. But I like that, right? Because you have to invite, if you're going to invite the questions in, and you have to give boundaries. Yeah. Or you're going to get
and maybe
you're blindsided, right?
And maybe you glide into that new path by purposely ending your presentation or your opening or whatever it is to say, look, here are the things I know, but here are the things I'm still have curiosity on. Still not sure if, we have enough runway to do. I'm still curious, right? You start using that word yourself. I'm curious to know if we have enough people to execute the plan. But I'm having you guys here too, because I want to know, after sort of hearing all this, what are you curious about? So that you don't all of a sudden use this weird new word without having sort of demonstrated it already.
Exactly.
Hey there, Erin here quick for a mano chat.
Look, if you're anything like I was when I was leading my corporate team, you're probably like a total hell yes when someone says that famous Peter Drucker line, culture eats strategy for breakfast. But the reality is that with the nonstop rat race that is your job, you likely struggle to find the time to spend on this elusive unicorn. Not to mention, you're probably completely overwhelmed trying to figure out just which of like 8 gazillion steps you should take to move things forward. When I was a corporate CEO, we were struggling big time, financially and culturally. But when I finally decided to make culture our number one initiative, no joke, our number one strategic initiative, crazy stuff happened. In just 3 years, our employee engagement score went up 15%, and we tripled our earnings. Now I help other leaders do the same thing, but much more simply. If this resonates and you'd like to talk through what this might look like for your team, simply send an email to hello@beauthenticinc.com. That's hello at just the letter B, authentic.inc.com, with just a little bit of background. And if we think your situation would benefit from our approach, we'll set up a strategy call to talk it through. No obligations. We could even do it over breakfast. And again, that's hello@beauthenticinc.com, or you can find it in the show notes here.
There are some strategies here, right? I would love to hear people like moments like this where they're either being self-reflective about their own moments of asking bad questions or have experienced this, But what there are some strategies too. Like if you have failed to set things up well, or you maybe didn't take that right pause, there are some strategies that I do think work, like the recovery strategies, I call them, because this is what I was also talking to my boss about was,
What
okay,
are these? What are these strategies?
What are these strategies?
Let me ask you, Nicole, what are 2 or 3 strategies that you think are good
I don't know
to deploy to ask better questions?
Oh, thank you for that question, Erin. No, this is like authentically out of conversation with Tom, because I was reflecting on the fact that I did not feel like I deflected some of the questions. I felt like I did a bad job and then had to, quote unquote, recover, right? Which makes me so mad, because I'm thinking about like, I am good on my feet. Like, why can I not create good boundaries, and what is wrong with me? So I think I used a combination, maybe deflection, like, oh, not just like, oh, I'll get back to you on that, but like, oh, that's a big one. I think that is something that probably needs its own meeting. And then people are groan and they're like, oh,
not
like,
a meeting.
Jesus. Yeah, like, oh, that's its own meeting, or the humor. Like I definitely use humor sometimes. I don't try to debase people's feeling, right? I don't try to debase their feelings, but I do, try to laugh a little bit at like the level of angst, to be like, wow, in the order of the universe of things, this tree cutting situation really is the thing that's going to put us over the edge today, isn't it? Or, say something about Mercury being in retrograde or whatever. I things that like my team or whoever I'm talking to will relate to, right? Like, I do try to, I don't mean to diminish, but I do try to, I guess maybe even, just sort of de-escalate, right? Like just de-escalate through humor, I think. So, and sometimes I just will be very vulnerable and just be like, and just be like, wow, I wasn't expecting that hardball. I thought this was going to be softball with you. It's like that's pretty hardball. And that can take people off their own feelings, I think, of sensitivity or negativity too, because I will tell you, in all my years of working, I don't feel like I don't take off a couple percentage points of folks who maybe thrive on toxicity. That is not the vast majority of people out there in the working world. Not our colleagues, not our customers. It's just not. And so a lot of times when you're running into stupid questions, it is because someone is feeling some measure of inordinate stress, or like you said, just has severely limited time, right?
Yep.
And if we're constantly trying to be, better workers and more authentic people, try to serve others, reduce toxicity in the environments, like being very aware of how we create honest inquiry, that is an enormous strategy. Because what the hell do we do all day except for write questions and answer them to other people? I mean, our lives are to email. We write questions or asks or requests and then answer them. Like that is what we do. So working on asking things better, we could probably do a whole podcast just on the art of asking for shit better.
We have a podcast episode. It's 119.
Oh, I mean an entire podcast.
Like not an episode.
Dedicate, not an episode, an entire podcast to like simply how do we have better conversation? How do we have better communication, right? How do we simply form things in a way that is just much more truly inclusive, right? One place where we, I think, are pretty good at doing this in the world is interview questions, right? People think really, really hard about their interview questions, and there's whole strategies around interview questions, right?
I don't think people think hard about their interview questions. I think they Google getting. They didn't come up with those.
Erin.
They didn't come up with those. That's Google or Chat GPT now.
People are stealing my shit, I think, out there because I write really good interview questions. But
you are the exception. You are the exception.
Write very good interview questions, and I think really hard about what is the basis of those questions. Like, okay, but maybe even if you don't write the questions and you steal them from someone else, something or some system has thought through the inclusivity of those questions. They are meant to be curious. They are meant to draw out information if they are good questions. They are really meant to incite conversation and insight so that the two people talking to each other can actually get information, right? So they're behavioral, they're experience-based, they're scenario-based, they're inquisitive, like.
So I'm going to disagree. I think many of those are bullshit.
Really?
I do.
Fascinating.
I do. And here's why. I mean, I think when they were first formed in like 1983, maybe, with great intent, they might have been. But what I find with those pre-formed behavioral questions, because, we had a whole bank of them in our HR system.
You mean corporate. Like, tell me what animal?
Tell me about a time when you blah, 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 when you had a conflict with something. I think the problem is they've been used for so long that they become less powerful because they're not authentic. Once something fair. In general, a system, a playbook or whatever works well,
right,
there is a shelf life, I feel like, for that, because it becomes to feel like, and that's why I love actually episode 119, which is way back, right? But go back to 119, how to ask powerful questions, where when I talk about it not like, here are the great questions, like here's the fish. It's like, here's how to fish. Here are some really simple hacks that you can do to put with your questions. And I think if you combine those things that we teach in episode 119 with what you're talking with true curiosity and intention and confidence, because I want to go back to what you said. A lot of times when you get those, we'll call them passive aggressive questions, for example, somebody has an opinion, but they form it, that they think they're on Jeopardy, and they form it, and they form it in a question when it's really an opinion. I think a couple thoughts on that. I think, first of all, that to me is a confidence. That's not, to your point, people are not trying to have a toxic environment, but the result could be toxic when people aren't feeling confidence in themselves to articulate, confidence in their organization to want to take in their thoughts and ideas. And one very specific strategy, when you have somebody, like you said, a lot of times in the work you do, they're very cerebral, smart people, but they come with sort of an intent formed in a question. One strategy I'd suggest is, let's say they ask a question, it's sort of, they have an opinion, and you're old school, you would just be like, okay, let me answer the question, get it right? Because it's a test. Instead, pause and say, I want to think about, but what do you think about that?
That's another good, I didn't even think about that, turning it around.
Turn it right. Like, oh, I don't know. That's a really good question. What do you think?
What do you think? Yeah, I think naturally sometimes I do that, particularly with there are certain people that I work with who I just feel comfortable saying like let's stop the mental jockeying here and tell me what
Mm.
you're actually thinking. Right?
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
It doesn't always come out it doesn't always come out in the way that you would expect. It's not always like it's not kumbaya. I am not a kumbaya person, so sometimes I will just turn around and be like, okay, what the fuck are you actually talking about?
Yeah. Sure. And we all
which is
have that, right? It's a
version of
gradient of
version
our
of that.
relationships. Yep.
Right. It's a reflection of that. But I think that's the same intent, which is to say, I understand that you're saying something, right? You're saying something, but what I'm really trying to understand is what are you actually looking for? What is,
Yeah.
And how am I the person to help you? And that might be an employee or manager or a customer, right? Like what am I actually trying to solve? Because I can sometimes get very, very easily caught up in the narrative, like the storyline. I come from this like humanitarian aid background, like where there's always a story. There's always some tragic story about how you got here. And by the time you sort out the tragic story, right, you feel like you do not have like the energy, the skill, the will, the ability, knowledge to actually solve the problem. You're just there like sitting in the muck and trying and like, just you're so washed over by the trauma that you might not actually get to the point of what they actually need. And I don't think anybody means that to happen, but we are human and it's hard to cut through the bullshit. And so I think that this is part of it is like how when something feels like it's too much or it's not right or it's not inclusive or it's exclusionary or what any of these things, right? It's an interrogation. It's a stupid question. It's a stupid situation that you need to unwind and you need to understand that. And I do think the people who have experienced this, probably a lot of people on our podcast, are the same people who have also perpetrated it. Like I have perpetrated this many times.
Yeah. 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 Well, and I think, what
I don't want to.
The metaphor that comes to mind is I think when we think about questions, whatever format, email, meetings, I think we think it's like a tennis match. And like the quicker we can get rid of the ball.
Yep.
And then when it comes to you, quicker you can hit the perfect hit back.
Right.
And by the way, in tennis, you can't double hit. You can't like ask another question or you have to just keep batting it back and forth. And that's actually not the case.
I think
right?
that's exactly right. I
think for people that are serving up the question, right? They have the serve on their side. You have to have the confidence that you don't just have to hit the ball hard. Like you can hit it strategically. Like if you've got an opinion, but you feel like the only avenue is through the quote unquote Q&A. This is why, by the way, I hate panel things or Q&As or Q&As. So
yes, I totally agree with you on this. Yes.
When I speak, this happened. I spoke at a big conference last year, the American Dental Association, and I had a whole hour and a half. And they said, well, we want you to do like an hour keynote and then a half an hour Q&A. And I said, can we do this instead of quote unquote Q&A? Because let's be honest, I'll have just talked for an hour and I don't have all the answers. And quite frankly, a lot of people in the audience have answers. Can we have it be like a discussion? There's a slight difference, right? Like a discussion where, and here's the irony. Anytime you have a Q&A, most people are going to give you an opinion and a passive aggressive question with a tact on question. And when you call it a discussion, guess what? Most people came up and had a question. It's like Murphy's Law.
You're so right. Panels are like they are like the stupid question generator, right?
Yeah.
They're so inauthentic.
Right. Everybody's in their cute little tennis skirts and, do I look good do I have my perfect little tennis outfit? And
it's pre-planned.
I'm going to hit the ball over.
It's all
I'm going to hit it back.
Moderator, just like, God, even like debates, it's all just, I didn't even think about that as a place where stupid questions are bred, but
yeah. I mean, so I think it's
something that's not a panel discussion at your next meeting, please.
Right. And I think it's about it all goes back to authenticity, right? It all goes back to everything, slides back there eventually. And what are you authentically curious about, or what do you authentically have an opinion on? If it's an opinion and somebody opens it up for questions, give them opinion. Don't try to, jeopardize it and
don't set
in the form of a
you don't need
question.
to set anybody up
No.
to be heard.
No, and that's the difference between the people that sort of stay where they're at and rise to the top. Those are the people that have a tiny, tiny bit of balls to state an opinion versus a question. So, I mean, I think that's one. Have the confidence that your opinions matter. Second is this curiosity thing. Like, questions should be reserved for pure curiosity, whether that curiosity is
Agreed.
I'm contemplating like Nicole does our episodes, or I'm like in some of my emails where I needed to know the 10,220, like I'm curious because I need to know. And then I think the third is really understanding how you can ask a much more powerful question, which is in episode 119. How to do it, how to fish.
It is a great episode.
And that's, once you get to a place where you have the confidence, you truly have a question, and if you can layer on what we talk about in 119, you're going to stand out. And back to the conversation, which started sort of like, if you're the receiver or the giver or what role you play, the best way to get the culture completely turned around on both sides is to start demonstrating that. And I don't care if you're the leader or you're not a leader or where you're at in the organization, but starting to demonstrate that, which is one of the principles of authenticity, model it. That's how you get away from maybe an organization or a culture that is stuck in a place of a lot of crappy questions.
Yes. A culture of crappy questions needs to be reiterated. And I'm going to add one more thing onto that. I think when we talk about authenticity, which is, which can be a challenging concept sometimes, people always think it means like you are who you are, you say what you need to say in any context. And I'm going to remind people that is not the point, right? And part of the reason why we are at this place today is because people feel empowered to say exactly what they want to say. And I will remind you, as does You Do You-ish, your first book. This is not a planned plug, but it is something that I think is very true, which is you have to be very thoughtful about how you are showing up, and questions are a powerful way of showing up, right? But they have to be in service of others, or else they are not authentic, and they will not help you in moving you forward in your career, in your community, in your relationships.
Mic drop. That's I couldn't have said it better. Thank you for asking the questions, bringing up the topic, filling out the form. And
I tried, Erin. I tried. I quoted Carl Sagan. Give me a break. But actually,
I'm going to have you end it with this. What's the one curious, from a true place of curious question you want to ask our listeners to leave them with?
What do I want to ask our question? All right. What is my curious question?
Mm-hmm.
Is that I want to know how our listeners are going to ask better questions in their next interaction. I really want to know that. I actually want to know what's the one thing that they got out of this conversation that they're going to try to employ, because you can't do it all. Yeah. I want to know what's one thing to ask a better question. And then I want to know what happens. And I hope some of it is like heartening. I hope some of it's funny. I hope some of it's a fucking train wreck, because that's fun too.
I love it. Feel free to share it on our Because Facebook group. You can just type in the letter B, CAUSE if you haven't yet joined, or share with us on LinkedIn. That's where we're at as well. So I love it. Good to see you.
All good. Ask better questions.
Hey, Erin here. So I know we talk often about this concept of authenticity as a secret weapon to success. I swear to you, my authenticity was literally the number one thing that helped me become both the CEO of a 9-figure company at the age of 42, but also that helped me lead an insanely successful financial and cultural turnaround of that same company. But I get that authenticity as a secret weapon kind of sounds fluffy. like fluffy unicorn doo-doo that leaves you wondering, what do I actually wake up tomorrow and do differently without looking stupid or getting fired? This is exactly why I put together the Authenticity Playbook for you. It gives you 10 plays or really thought starters that are simple, actionable things that will help you up your career and leadership game. To get your free Authenticity Playbook, go to beauthenticinc.com/playbook. Again, that's beauthenticinc.com, just the letter B, authentic.inc.com/playbook. Or to make it simple, just scroll down to the show notes and we've got you covered with a link there too.